Hello, everybody. How are you doing? I hope you're doing really well. Wherever, blah, 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 blah. My phone is talking to me. Wherever you are in the world. Yes, I do. I hope that you are doing well. We've had a family member, not immediate household, but another family member, get struck with COVID. So, yeah, I'm extra aware of it at the moment. It's not gone yet. It looks like it's going to be a little while longer still. So we'll see. Have you noticed any fresh changes around the house here? I hope you have. I hope you're nice and observant and aware of these sort of things, or noticing these sort of things. Yes, I see you. Yes, I see you. That's wonderful. So glad you could make it. Right. What was I going to say? Lots of things. I can turn off the distraction if they are a problem, but let me know if that is the case. One of the things I've done is to remove the on-screen chat. So over here on my right-hand side normally is a panel that shows chat, except that people who are watching this live or as a Twitch video recording actually have the option of popping out the chat on the side of their window. The one that's actually within the video frame doesn't actually really perform any purpose except for showing you what people have already said, and it doesn't show you what the results of commands are, like the blocks of text that I have come up with a little bit of humour to write for you. And you can't interact with them when they're on the video window. So I was thinking about it the other day, and I was thinking, well, what about I actually remove that from there, and then I can actually use the space over there to put our on-screen jigsaw puzzles. And then I can move the header up there that says story time, so it goes across to nearer to the edge of the window, and then the title of the book isn't quite as crowded and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, a little bit of housekeeping with our overlays. Getting there. I still have things in mind for doing one that is, how do I explain it? Made up of not blocks of text and words and stuff like I've got now, but one that's actually made up of little pieces of images that remind us of stories, kind of like daydreaming, or the sort of pictures you see in your head as a kid when you've had a nice bedtime story, to do with the story in your mind as you're going to sleep. So they would be nighttime style of pictures and images that would relate to things from kids' stories, such as a steam train, a hillside with a stream below it, a great big oak tree leaning over things, all sorts of bits and pieces, and then have my video window in amongst all of that. So I'm just sort of figuring out what I actually want in the way of pictures, and then I've got to figure out how I'm going to edit those pictures so that they're suitable, so that they actually look like part of a nighttime scene, which means decreasing the saturation and changing which colours are dominant and all sorts of complicated things like that. Apparently I don't do things by halves. Yes. So what else? I think there's been a few other bits and pieces. No, that's not the one I wanted. No, that's not the one I wanted. I'm sure there was one I had around here that let me do some things. Let's see if that's going to help. I think so. There, that's a little bit better. Right. I'm just going to give you a couple of commands in my chat box. There you go. Stream Elements has nicely said hi for me. I should probably introduce myself if you're new here. I'm Jev. I live in New Zealand, commonly referred to as NZ, and I read old children's books. Yes, real old children's books. And the reason I'm turning around now is because I'm feeling underneath my green screen here, which you can't quite see because it's green screening, to find some old books that are behind me, hiding under the green screen, so I can show you what I mean. Yes, I actually read old books. These are the books that I read when I was growing up, such as this one here, which we've just finished. As you can see, It's rather dilapidated. I can actually say the words properly sometimes. Yes, sometimes I can. Let's put in a command about that. So things like this, where the pages are a different sort of paper texture to what you'd expect. This one, they're quite thick, almost like soft cardboard. Soft because it's very easy to damage, and it's got a rather almost a fluffy texture. And then you've got one of the perils of these sort of books, with the age this is that the illustrations have a tendency to fall out, and earlier generations of your family might have decided to repair them by sellotaping them back in. Not a good idea. Don't tell any librarian anywhere ever that you have sellotaped pages in a book. Sellotape is quite damaging to the paper, among other things. It breaks down the paper, as well as leaving glue residue and all sorts of things like that. Here's a better example of an old book of the sort that I read. This one was given to my grandmother's brother, older brother. She was the youngest in the family. And it was given to him in July 1897. So that's quite an old book. Not too unusual for me to read a book like that. So one of the things that are quite fun about these books is when I'm reading them, if it is actually a physical book I'm reading from, I get the tactile experience, which you don't get. You get to hear it. My fingers running over the page. But I can actually feel how the printing letters in the printing press have pressed into the page and dented it for the shape of each of the letters there. And then you get there's more of this style of illustration in the books from the particular era that this one is. So this one here is a brother and a sister, I think it was. And these were clothes that were currently fashionable at the time, Edwardian period. Well, no, actually it's probably still Victorian, actually. But in the Edwardian period, which is a little bit later on, and then also into the beginning of the 20th century, these were not uncommon clothing styles for the children to be wearing. But the actual image is made by scratches being made on... Sorry, Jonathan, try that again. Break it down into smaller chunks, and then it will post okay, but you have to wait 30 seconds. One of the anti-spam things that are set up on my channel is paragraph length, and I can't even remember what the maximum length is before it recognizes it as spam, because I'm trying to make sure that people who drop big long adverts in don't actually get a chance to. So sorry about that. It's just one of those things. So I'm just going to read this out for those who are actually watching over on YouTube. Hello, hello. No, not hello, that's me. Sellotape used to be used in herbarium in botany. Oh, was that to hold pieces of plant into a book? I'm not sure. They'd stick the plants to the paper with it. Yes, that's what I was wondering about. That's the cover of that first one that I showed you has a piece of sellotape on it across the illustration that has been pasted by the bookbinders onto the cover, and it's discoloured it. So they'd stick the plants to the paper with it. Jonathan's obviously having to retype all of the little bit that he said before. I'm glad that you're actually able to still talk. It hasn't timed you out for too long. Anyway, reference to, alas, the glue would go brown and the cellophane, which is the tape part of sellotape, would get brittle. Yes, and then the plants would fall out of the pages because the thing that was holding them in place wouldn't hold them in. So yeah, it wasn't such a good idea to put them in. And I'm guessing that they would have initially thought, this is a great idea. We have a new way of actually keeping samples of plants in a book. until they started falling apart. And you also start to get, if it's an historic book, there can be quite a kerfuffle over the fact that the composition of the tape and the composition of the adhesive can both actually make the paper start to break down. It destroys it. Also, typing on mobile. Yes, sorry about that, Jonathan. Yeah, it would have been thought a great. I can totally understand why they would have got so excited about it at the time, but unfortunately not such a good idea after all. Right. So, yeah, I'm Jev. I read old children's books, and I've just given you samples of old children's books. And the reason I read them is, first of all, originally it was because they were there, because I grew up with them. They were the books that were in our house. They were the ones that were available to just pick up off the shelf, off the table, or out of the little cabinet or something like that, if you wanted something to occupy your mind late at night, or when you were meant to be doing something else, or anything else like that. And so they were there, and so I'd pick them up, and the way kids do initially, if they're illustrated, you'd look at the pictures, and then you'd want to know more about the pictures. And thankfully, a lot of the old ones will have a little caption underneath, and usually that caption is part of the text of the story. And so you'd be looking across the page to try and find out where that caption had come from, to see if you could find out more about what the picture was about. And then after a while, you just get hooked into the story, and so you'd resign yourself to reading the whole thing and just flip forward to the beginning, start at the beginning, and read the whole thing through. And by then, you were totally hooked on books, if they were good books, which in our house they were. Good to see you too, Jonathan. It's fabulous that you can make it here. Thanks. Appreciate you being here and just being part of the community. And I hope you're well too. Q is here too. I'm just probably saying things I'm not meant to say. I will be putting up a puzzle shortly, but I'll do my little introduction first, just to make sure everyone's listening. No, I will not be giving a test afterwards, and then I'll put the puzzle up when I get into the actual main part of the story. So currently we are reading a story by Edith Nesbit. We've read a few books of hers before, and if you are unfamiliar with them, if you are new here, you can actually go and have a listen to the previous books that I've read of hers if you go over to my YouTube channel. Oh, Q, that's no good. I'm so sorry to hear that. Q's saying, it's all right, I'm very sick with COVID, so mostly lurking today. I am quite okay with that. If I can keep your brain, or your ears at least, occupied while you are feeling unwell and probably unable to do anything, then I'm so glad I can be here and help with that somehow, kind of, whatever it is that I'm doing. Anyway, so for those of you who haven't been here before and are not familiar with it, I have a YouTube channel, and I put the recordings of the stories that I've read over on YouTube, and I arrange them into playlists for each of the books, well, almost all of them, and I crop it down for virtually all of them. There's only one book I haven't done that. Well, no, there's a few books when I didn't have the technology to be able to do it. So generally speaking, I crop it down to the video window here. And if you're watching on YouTube, you're going like, well, that's what I'm looking at. I have no idea what this dumb lady is talking about. Well, it's actual fact. I'm reading this live on Twitch. And if you want to be part of the experience, come over to my Twitch channel. The link's somewhere around on YouTube, and it will give you my link to my Twitch channel. It's basically twitch.tv /JevNZ. Just remember there's 3 V's in Jev. Anyway, so I crop it down, I put it into a playlist over on YouTube, and you can listen to a whole book right through from beginning to end. But you will get these little chats. You'll get the chat at the beginning, you'll get the shorter chat at the end, and you also get the in-between chapters chats. There's usually a little bit of chatting then, and sometimes some snacking, which reminds me of something I have to tell you in a minute, just because I always do. And also, if there is anything that we come across in the story that I think you may not understand, or you may not have come across before, or I've got some funny story or some intriguing experience to share with you, because I've had a lot of experience, hence the grey hair, then I will actually stop what I'm doing in the middle of reading and actually share whatever it is. Sometimes I will look up pictures online to show you the type of plants that are in a story, or a particular piece of historic equipment or something like that, just because I find it very interesting, and I've learnt so much over the years as I've been growing up, just because I would investigate the things I'd come across in stories, and because of the context of a story which is a pleasant experience, reading or listening to a story, your brain actually is more open to learning about new things because they're associated with this pleasant experience. So hopefully, you being here, you have a pleasant experience listening to the stories. If you don't, then I'm really sorry about that. There's not a lot I'm actually in a position of doing about you not enjoying it, except for referring you to other story readers or gamers or anything else like that that might be able to keep you otherwise occupied. I'm just moving something here because it's bugging me where it is on the overlay. Yes, I should not be doing this at the same time as when I'm meant to be talking to you and reading to you. It just makes more sense though. So there you go. I've just moved it. The Codex logo down in the bottom right hand corner, which is where I'm pointing if you're watching on YouTube. Come over to Twitch and find out what I'm talking about. So Codex, I will give you the link for the Codex Discord server and I will tell you about it. Right, Codex is a group of people who read public domain books. We read books that are out of copyright because usually it's just because they're so old. Some of the readers actually also read their own books, ones that they have written themselves, which is great because they're allowed to, because they own the copyright. And we all read books on Twitch live. That's where we read them. Some of us also put them over onto YouTube. There's a wide range, a fairly wide range of readers, because we've got, I'm trying to think, we've got school teachers, we've got librarians, we've got actors, we've got voice actors, we have audiobook narrators and readers, i.e. people who actually do this professionally. So they have the beautiful tones to the voice. Sometimes they even use good accents to do with the country that a particular character has come from, and it will be accurate. Unlike what I do. Mine are just all over the place. All my accents sound the same almost. I have my normal reading voice and then I have my working person voice if I have to define between them. And they don't get to do this nattering. They don't get to do this chatting stuff. All they do is they sit in their recording booth with their microphone, with their book, and read it. And then when they make a mistake, they go over that part again, and then they'll go over it again. Sometimes they read a whole section again just because they didn't feel that they got the intonation quite right. That sort of stuff. So kudos to them for their skills and dedication to actually being able to do it. We get the benefit of the fact that they know what they're doing when they're reading a book, and they like to read books in their spare time as well on Twitch as one of the Codex readers, or several of the Codex readers. So we have a wide variety of readers. Now, most of the readers read books that aren't specifically written for children. In the past, I've always referred to them as adults' books, but sometimes that has a different connotation. No, I just mean books that aren't specifically written for children. And there will be books that are read that have been written for children, but a lot of the books that they read are other ones, such as, I'm trying to think, Herman Melville books. Moby Dick is not a children's story, regardless of children's cartoons, and a whole lot of other things like that. So they read a really wide variety of books. I only read kids' books. And the reason behind that is I would like to have grannies and their grandkids who are getting bored. They've seen all the TV programs before. The weather's bad outside, or they just want to spend some time together, and Granny discovers something that she loved when she was a kid, one of the stories that she grew up with. I would like her to know that listening and engaging with people on the internet around something that she is familiar with and comfortable with can actually be a nice, fun, safe thing to do, and she can share it with her family. rather than being scared because the internet is a big, scary, dangerous place. Well, parts of it are, but not all of it. And so therefore I actually have chosen specifically to read children's books. Now, I don't read just for children. I read for anyone who wants to listen, but I want them to be, I want my channel to, both my channels, my YouTube one and my Twitch one, to be places where the grannies can feel safe to be spending time with their grandchildren and not worrying about the language that's involved, the implications in a story that might be off colour, and that sort of thing. I will generally use rather euphemistic terminology for that sort of thing, just because I want them to feel like they are welcome here and safe here. And from there, once you find somewhere safe, you can start to explore a little bit further into the other bits and learn to recognize the things you've got to be careful of. That's how we learn in real life. That's how children learn when they're walking, when they pull themselves up on the side of the sofa in the living room. Usually there's carpet there, so if they fall down, they're not going to hurt themselves. And they keep pulling themselves up against the side of the sofa, and then they start shuffling along the side. You don't take them out to the middle of the pedestrian crossing on Queen Street and let them go mad on the middle of the pedestrian crossing. That's stupid. That's a really dangerous thing to do. So we don't do that with people who are scared of the internet either. We give them a safe place that they can spend time, and then as they develop the skills, as they develop the understanding of how things function, they can then go further afield. So that's part of the ethos behind me having a family safe channel, why I call it family friendly, why I also refer to it as being cozy, just that sort of style of thing. Anyway, so that's all about that side of it. The other side of it is, what is the other side of it? The other side of it is that I'm here and I'm reading stories to you. Yep. And I've got an open chat. So you guys are allowed to chat here, but there are rules in place. And when you first chat here, you'll be asked to agree to those rules. If you join my Discord server, you'll be asked to agree to very similar rules, which are to do with your conduct, because I want it to stay a safe place. But because of that, it means that, unfortunately for Jonathan this afternoon, there are rules in place that are automatically functioning rules where if you put too many words in, like a really long paragraph, because it often is the way that spam advertising gets put into reading channels and stuff like, well, not just reading channels on Twitch where people are gaming and all sorts of stuff. Often the spam posts are quite long. So if I have a limit that's shorter, then you might mean you have to break down what you want to say into several different bits of information that you post, but you can still talk because you've got the brains to be able to figure out that you can still say something. But it also means I've got some filters in place for bad words and all sorts of things like that. And a lot of those things function automatically on my channel. Every now and then there'll be something that will come up where I have to decide if it's actually okay for it to come through or not. And I, in my being a human being and having the brain I've got, I can see the context of how that's actually been put into the conversation, and I can decide if something's appropriate or not. The same also goes with in terms of chat not coming through. The same goes with if you put too many emotes together. Speaking of emotes, if you follow me, you've got 5 emotes that you can use in my chat. If you subscribe, you get an extra one. Eventually there will be more. And if you are subscribed to somebody else's Twitch channel, you can actually use emotes from between those 2 channels. Did you know that? Oh, very clever. Yes, just like that. There's some emotes. I'm not sure exactly what the limit is for how many can be posted at a time. But yes, I do have some. And I am intending to do some more. I'm hoping that they're clear enough for people to actually feel that they're happy to use them. And if you have ideas about things like other emotes that I can make, or other books to read, or anything like that, and you want me to see that and you think it might get overlooked in chat on when I'm reading, then what you can do is actually add them in our Discord server as suggestions. Thank you. I appreciate that, Jonathan. Jonathan says, very nice emotes. I tried to do something that was characteristic of the sort of responses I get because my face is all over the place. I wave my hands around, but also using the colours that I have ended up with as my kind of my theme colours for here. Right, so what else? I was going to tell you something else about those. Oh yeah, Discord server. So my Discord server is this one, I think. Yes, it worked. Could someone who is already part of the Discord server actually just try out the link, because I don't know if I managed to get it fixed or not. I know last time I was reading I didn't actually use it because I thought I hadn't fixed it, and then afterwards I thought, oh, I think I might have. And then just let me know in chat, and then I'll make a note to myself to actually do something about it. Now, I do have some tips if you're new here. Apart from me saying once again, hi, I'm Jev, I live in New Zealand, blah, 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 and talking for way too long, I have 3 main tips, and then I've actually accrued a few extras, and I'll hopefully remember them. First tip, drink. Have something to drink. Yeah, lots of noise over here. Have something to drink handy. I always have water. It's great. It keeps your brain functioning and it keeps your body functioning. So this is my water bottle for when I'm waving it at you so I don't actually get water everywhere. You'll actually see me on stream using a water cup like this just because it holds a lot more. It doesn't tip over as much and it's much less likely to spill. It's not watertight, but it's less likely to spill. But along with water, you can have your other favourite drinks as well. So I've also got coffee. Look, I have coffee. I definitely have coffee. I'm using a French press or cafetiere or plunger pot, whichever terminology you wish to use. And I'm drinking it black because we ran out of milk last night. And my milk's not coming until tomorrow morning. It was going to come tonight. It was going to be delivered by the butcher when they deliver their meat. But they ran out of milk, so they're having to wait for their milk to arrive so they can deliver it to me. Oh. Anyway, so therefore me changing from my usual espresso-based milk coffees, such as a flat white, very New Zealand thing, to plunger coffee just because it works very well without having milk in it, whereas the espresso is a bit too strong for me when it's not got milk. So that's point 1 is drink. Drinks. Point 2 is snacks. What have we got today? Snacks. I have snacks. I have more than one snack. So I have a snack log. They're in New Zealand, like a muesli or a granola bar, but they're a lot smaller than usual. They're about this big as opposed to a normal muesli bar or granola bar, which is this big. And these are also sort of rounded. And I don't need to tell you all about how I thought that they looked like the originals were made in a gem iron. You can look at one of the other videos because that's not been edited out. So I've also got a muesli bar, which is a nut butter, peanut butter and salted caramel bar. Okay, we'll see how that goes. It was given to me. So I haven't tried that flavour yet. The other one is carob coated fruit and nut. Not my favourite one of those, but not bad. My favourite one of the Tasty brand snack logs is one that I can't get at my supermarket, and I don't know if they make it anymore. It's just plain apricot. No chocolate coating, no carob coating, just apricot in the flavour. So my third tip, no, I still have more snack foods. My other snack foods are, I have cheese and crackers, which I haven't put together yet. Yes, I've got a knife for doing it. So they're sitting there waiting for me when I get hungry, if I get that sort of hungry. And so my third tip, so drinks, snacks, and, say it with me, somewhere comfortable to sit, hence the cushion. There you go. And if you need to, and I really hope that Q has somewhere comfortable to lie, not sit, but lie, unless she's been lying down too long, in which case maybe sitting up's good. But somewhere comfortable can also mean having a stream buddy, someone to sit and listen with you, something comfortable to hold on to, something that'll make you feel comfortable and just sort of all inside. If you need that, go and find it. I'm about to start reading, but that's okay. You won't miss too much, and you can always catch up on it later. You can watch the video afterwards, the bit that you missed. Right, I'm just taking mouthfuls of coffee, lukewarm coffee, but that's one of the benefits of when it's cold is that the how cold it is doesn't matter. It's great. I was tweaking some of my settings earlier on today on Twitch, and then it turns out that then I decided I'd run the automatic setup test, and the settings that I had originally had, which I had downgraded from, actually were better, so I've just gone back to that. So hopefully there's no problem for you with the way it works. Right, I'm looking at my list of links that I have up here on the side of my monitor. By the way, I have two, which is why sometimes you'll see me looking over here and twiddling around, and my keyboard's noisy. It's only a problem when I'm streaming. It's okay when I'm doing things normally because I don't mind the noise. I like the feel of it when it's a clicky keyboard. Anyway, I'm looking over at my list of things to say. Oh, Codex, that's right. I gave you a link for the Codex Discord. If you are not familiar with Discord, it is kind of like a smash up between old-fashioned forums and bulletin boards and some aspects of Facebook, the community sense and the fact that you need to join a group to be able to participate in the group, that sort of thing. So it's just a much more modern way of doing things, and it has a lot of other facilities that can be used without it costing anything extra. So Twitch, YouTube and Discord, all three services which I use and recommend, you can use most of what they do that most people want to use, you can do for free. So if you're new here and you're not familiar with this and I'm recommending these things, don't think that you can't use it because it's going to cost you something. It won't. It doesn't have to. You don't have to take out a monthly membership. If you want to do a monthly membership for any of those services that they have available, that's fine. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can actually have, you can gift, you can use, not gift, you can subscribe to a Twitch channel, which is normally something that you pay to do, but you have one subscription free per month if you're an Amazon Prime member. So you can subscribe to somebody's channel, and if they're, unlike me, have lots of emotes, you can use those emotes. And if you have paid a subscription fee, then you can use them on other channels that you also have a subscription to. Just lots of little tips like that. There's some little benefits to putting small amounts of money into it, like as a way, like when you go to a cafe and you like their service, and so you put some coins in the tip jar, not the chip jar, the tip jar. You can actually buy bits. Bits are just like cents, and donate them to different people that you're watching, just randomly as you want to. Or you can do a monthly subscription to someone's channel on Twitch. There are similar things over on YouTube, and I haven't a clue what they are because I don't use them, because I don't do live things over on YouTube, and I don't do a membership system over there either because it's just too many things to keep track of. And also I don't actually have enough members over, don't have enough subscribers over on YouTube to be able to activate anything like that. If you do want to be notified when I put up videos from here over to YouTube, subscribe to my channel. Then it will tell you when I have put up a new video, and it will just be one of these videos over here. I very, 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 very rarely do anything that doesn't go through Twitch first, just because, I mean, if I'm going to be talking and recording, I might as well do it here. But yeah, if you've missed out on something, or if you want to read them again as a whole bunch of them through a playlist or something like that, it's a great way to do it. And also, if you're in a different time zone to me and you find it quite hard to actually catch me when I'm live, you can either watch the video afterwards on Twitch, or you can watch it when it comes out over on YouTube. There's all these options. One of the things I love about the internet and technology is that we have so many options. So have you spotted the changes, the housekeeping I've done? Sorry, I'm turning around to take my slippers off because I'm getting hot. Have you spotted the housekeeping that I've done here on my Twitch channel, just on my overlay area, and what's going on here? Have you spotted anything new? I'm about to start reading, so I am going to put up our jigsaw puzzle so you can see it. And Oh, yep, yep. There it is. Right. If you would like to do the jigsaw puzzle, put exclamation mark and then jigsaw or puzzle or puz, P-U-Z, or P-Z even, into the text box, the chat box, and it will give you the invitation link so you can play the puzzle while I read. So there you go. So yeah, that's why I took away the on screen, the on overlay text box, because you can't interact with that one anyway, and it gives me more space to be able to put the puzzle so you guys can see it, and then the words up above me aren't quite so crowded. So we are going to read. I am reading The House of Arden by Edith Nesbit, and I think it was published in, oh, that's a good question. I had the information here somewhere and now it's gone, just like most of my mind. Here we go, looking it up. This is what I was talking about before, where I find things out. The House of Arden. It was published in 1908, and that was the piece of information I have forgotten. So here we go. I can get that one out of the way because there's the little tiny bit of information they have is very little and tiny. We shall carry on with the actual story. So what we've done so far is we've only read the scene setting chapter, chapter 1. I'm trying to think of if it actually had a title to it. I shall tell you in a moment. The first chapter is called Arden's Lord, and it was about, what was it about? It's about this brother and sister. She's actually older in the story, which is a little bit unusual for the age of the book, but the author's a little bit revolutionary anyway, so every now and then she rocks the boat. But she tries to do it in such a way that people will keep reading the story instead of getting all huffy and throwing the book away. Right, so they have met this old chap. They were going up into the hills behind the south coast in England, probably down in Kent somewhere, and they were up in the downs. The downs are the big chalk hills, chalk being a type of stone, by the way, and then they have grass grows over these hills and the sheep graze it, and so there's meant to be a local castle up there which the children were going up to visit, and they happened to bump into an old chap who had the key for getting into the inside of where the castle is. It's a ruin, hence the type of puzzles we've been doing, and he also tells them the story about how supposedly someone of the family that the castle had belonged to was meant to inherit was meant to find the old treasures. So we're going to find out what happens. I'm going to read the last bit of our first chapter because we go straight from that into the beginning of the second chapter, which is called the Mouldiwarp. Nothing else. So they've recited this poem, which is meant to be like casting a spell to make something happen that will enable them to be able to find it. There's a whole lot of extra details in terms of how old the boy is and all that sort of stuff. If you want to know all that, go and listen to the rest of the story, the first chapter, which is still up on Twitch. Nothing else happened at all. A flush of pink from the sun setting spread over the downs. The grass stems showed up thin and distinct. The skylarks had ceased to sing, but the scent of the bean flowers and the seaweed was stronger than ever, and nothing happened till Edred cried out, that's the boy, cried out, "What's that?" For close to his foot something moved. Not quickly or suddenly so as to startle, but very gently, very quietly, very unmistakably. Something that glittered goldenly in the pink, diffused light of the setting sun. "Oh, why," said Elfrida, that's the girl, stooping, "why, it's—" Chapter 2, the Mouldiwarp. And it was the living image of the little pig-like animal that was stamped in gold, above the checkered shield on the cover of the white book in which they'd found the spell, and as on the yellowy white of the vellum book cover, vellum is a type of pre-leather stuff that was used for making pages in books, on the yellowy white of the vellum book cover, so here on the thymy grass of the knoll it shone golden. That the knoll, smallish, rounded hilltop, kind of. Thyme. The reference here to thyme is the herb thyme, Thyme, growing wild and amongst the grasses on the hillside. And so here on the thymy grass of the knoll it shone golden. The children stood perfectly still. They were afraid to move lest they should scare away this little creature which, though golden, was alive and moved about at their feet, turning a restless nose to left and right. "It is," said Elfrida again, very softly so as not to frighten it. "What?" Edred asked, though he knew well enough. "Off the book that we got the spell out of. That was our crest on the top of our coat of arms, like on the old snuff box that was great-grandpa's." "Well, this is our crest come alive, that's all," she said. "Don't you be too clever," said Edred. "It said badge. I don't believe badge is the same thing as crest. A badge is leeks or roses or thistles, something you can wear in your cap." Oh, maybe I need to go back to what it said it was going to be, because I can't remember. Yeah, I'm going to read, here you go, I'm going to read the poem, which is kind of like the spell, which they're meant to do, which will help them to find this treasure. "Hear, O badge of Arden's house, the spell my little age allows," because he had to be under a certain age. "Arden," and he's having his birthday in 2 days' time, "Arden speaks it without fear. Badge of Arden's house, draw near. Make me brave and kind and wise, and show me where the treasure lies." So, there you go, we've referred to the badge twice. And that's why he's saying, but a badge is leeks or roses or thistles, something you can wear in your cap. Leeks, the Welsh, why did I go and say Greek? The Welsh, leek is their national flower. And as a symbol, often you'd see crossed leeks on things. And so it's the sort of thing which you have as a cap badge for certain things. Roses, the same. The roses were emblems of 2 of the houses of royalty in England. Thistles, Scotland. There you go. She's given us all 3. Wales, Scotland, and England. Something you can wear in your cap. I shouldn't like to wear that in my cap. And still the golden thing at their feet moved cautiously and without ceasing. "Why," said Edred suddenly, "it's just a common old mole." Do you know what a mole is? I'm not sure. I don't think there's actually a good picture of it initially in this story, so I will find one. Not the star-nosed mole in the story about the kids who live in the city under the ground. That's not the style at all. So this is the sort of creature they are looking at, except it says it's golden, so maybe it is an albino one, and it's catching the sunlight. Don't know. Sorry, this is one of the things I do because I feel the need to find out about things just the way it is. Sorry. Actually, I'm not really that sorry about it. Picture. Add a picture. Let's find somewhere I can add a picture. Add image. And find image. It has to be on my computer, so I've done that bit. Now I just have to find the picture of the mole for you. Here it is. And there's the picture of the mole. I'm going to move it so you can see it, but I am going to move it so it's behind me. Streaming cam, there. Right, so there's the mole, except that they're a lot smaller than that. They're usually, from what I understand, about this big, and the fur is very, very close. It's like velvet. It's sort of like, anyway, yeah. So now you know what they look like. And they don't do very well in bright sunlight because they live under the ground. We've actually come across a mole in one of our previous stories, which was The Wind in the Willows. And if you want to have a listen to that one you'll have to go over to YouTube. Right. Sorry, my throat. It isn't, it's our own crest, and that's on the spoons and things, because they're living with their aunt. It's our own old family mole. That's our crest. How can it be a common mole? It's all golden. There you go, figured that bit out. And even as she spoke, it left off being golden, for the last bit of sun dipped behind the shoulder of the downs, and in the grey twilight that was left, the mole was white. Anyone could see that. There you go. It was albino. Oh, said Elfrida, but she stuck to her point. So you see, she went on, it can't be just a really mole. Really moles are black. Sort of greyish black. Well, said Edred, it's very tame, I will say that, which is very unusual. Well, Edred was beginning, but at that same moment the mole also suddenly and astonishingly said, well, that's not what I was expecting. There was a hushed pause. Then, did you say that? Elfrida whispered. No, said Edred. Did you? No, said Edred. You did. Don't whisper now, said the mole. Tain't purty manners, so I tells 'ee. He's rural, obviously, so now you're going to get my rural accent, which is a real butcher. This is not very good. And with one accord the two children came to their knees, one on each side of the white mole. I say, said Edred. Now don't, said the mole, pointing its nose at him quite as disdainfully as any human being could have pointed a finger. Don't you go for to pretend you don't know as Mouldiwarps has got tongues in their heads, same as what you've got. But not to talk with, said Elfrida softly. Don't you tell me, said the Mouldiwarp, bristling a little. Hasn't no one told you e'er a fairy tale, or all us beasts has tongues, and when we're there, and when I'm trying to make sense of what he's saying here. And when we're there, us users of en. When you're where, said Edred, rather annoyed at being forced to believe in fairy tales, which he had never really liked. Why, in a fairy tale, for sure, said the mole. Wherever to be goodness else on earth do you suppose you be? We're here, said Edred, kicking the ground to make it feel more solid and himself more sure of things, on Arden Knoll. And ain't that in a fairy tale? Demanded Mouldiwarp triumphantly. You do talk so free. You call me, and here I be. What do you want? They called him. Are you, said Elfrida, thrilling with surprise and fear and pleasure and hope and wonder and a few other things, which taken in the lump are usually called 1,000 conflicting emotions, are you the badge of Arden's house? Course I be, said the mole, what's left of it, and never did I think to be called one by the Arden boy and girl as didn't know their own silly minds. What do you want, eh? We told you in the spell, said Elfrida. Oh, be that all, said the mole bitterly. Nothing else? I'm to make him brave and wise and show him to treasure. Milksop, it said, so suddenly and fiercely that it almost seemed to spit the words in poor Edred's face. I'm not, said Edred, turning turkey red. I got into the house and found the spell anyway. Yes, and who did all the looking for it? She did. Bless you. I was there. I know all about it. That's what was scurrying in the corner when they were in the library. If it was showing her the treasure, now there'd be some sense in it. I think you're a little unfair, said Elfrida, as earnestly as though she had been speaking to a grown-up human being. If he was brave and wise, we wouldn't want you to make him it. You ain't got nothing to do with it, said the mole crossly. Yes, she has, said Edred. I mean to share and share with her whatever I get. And if you could make me wise, I'd teach her everything you taught me. But I don't believe you can, so there. Do you believe I can talk? The mole asked, and Edred quite definitely and surprisingly said, No, I don't. You're a dream, that's all you are, he said, and I'm dreaming you. And what do you think? The mole asked Elfrida, who hesitated. I think, she said at last, that it is getting very dark and Aunt Edith will be anxious about us, and will you meet us another day? There isn't time to make us brave and wise tonight. That there ain't for sure, said the mole meaningly. But you might tell us where the treasure is, said Edred. That comes last. Greedy, said the mole. I've got to make you kind and wise first, and I see I've got my work cut out. Good night. It began to move away. Oh, don't go, said Elfrida. We shall never find you again. Oh, don't. This is dreadful. The mole paused. I've got to let you find me again. Don't upset yourself, it said bitterly. When you wants me, come up on the knoll and say a piece of poetry to call me, and I'll come. And it started again. But what poetry? Edred asked. Oh, anything. You can pick and choose. Edred thought of the Lays of Ancient Rome, which is a piece of poetry which apparently they had to learn for school. And you can look it up if you want. The Lays, Lays, which will have a different meaning to what you're expecting. The Lays of Ancient Rome, to find out what it was they had to learn at school and why they had to learn that. It's probably something to do with history. Oh, 'tain't no good without you makes it up yourselves, said the Mouldiwarp. So now they've got to make up poems? Oh, said the two, much disheartened. And of course it must be asking me to kindly come to you. Get along home. Where are you going? Elfrida asked. Home too, of course, it said, and this time it really did go. The two children turned towards the lights of Ardenhurst Station in perfect silence. Only as they reached the place where the down turf ends and the road begins, Edred said in tones of awe, I say. And Elfrida answered, Yes, isn't it? Then they walked, still without talking, to the station, because they had come to that part of the Downs on the train, because it's along the coast from where their village is. The lights there and the voices of porters and passengers, the rattle of signal wires and the ping-ping of train signals had on them the effect of a wet sponge passed over the face of a sleeper by some already awake person. They seemed to have awakened from a dream, and the moment they were in the train, which fortunately came quite soon, they began to talk. They talked without stopping till they got to Cliffville Station, and then they talked all the way home. Now, I'm fairly certain that Cliffville is not actually a real place. Shall we look that one up? Yes, here we go. Maps. And we are going to go to, when it gets there. Zoom, 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 right out, scroll, zoom in again on England, southern England, and we will look for a place called Cliffville. Nope. There is a place called Cliff's End, but I don't know if it's on the south coast. Oh, it is. Near Ramsgate and Broadstairs. Maybe she's basing it in Cliff's End. Because what I have noticed with these, with a lot of these authors, is they have a tendency to write about places that are real, places that they know, places that maybe are quite close to somewhere that they have actually lived, just because it's actually easier to write about something that you know, but then to turn it into something imaginary rather than start completely from scratch. Sometimes it can be a way of making something feel more real, which I think I talked about in the last book as well. Right, so Cliffville. They talked without stopping till they got to Cliffville Station. And I've just remembered I didn't give you one of my extra tips, one of my bonus tips. One of the ideas is to have a pencil and paper or a pen and paper handy, and you can write down all the places, the plants, the foods, the songs, the poems, whatever that we mention that are in the story, that you can look up and find out if they're real or where they are, or if there's a particular type of food that's mentioned and you look it up and you think, oh, that sounds interesting, you might be able to actually cook it for yourself and try it out and see what the experience is like. It might make it feel very old-fashioned because they're old books, but it's a way of just giving yourself a sense of connection with the story that you're reading. It can be quite fun. I've done a lot of that over the years, trying things out that we come across in books. Carrying on. They talked all the way home, and by the time they reached the house with the green balconies and the smooth, pale, polished door knocker, they had decided, as children almost always do in cases of magic adventure, that they had better not say anything to anyone. As I am always pointing out, it is extremely difficult to tell your magic experiences to people who not only will not, but cannot believe you. This is one of the drawbacks of really wonderful happenings, as you don't get to share them with people quite the same way. I'm just giving you the link for the puzzle if you want to do the puzzle that's over here. And that's the other thing for YouTube listeners, watchers. If you want to actually do the puzzles, which currently you can't see, you need to be part of one of my live video streams, because then you can actually use the link and play the jigsaw puzzle that's on the screen, and it gives your hands something to do while you're listening. Right, this is one of the drawbacks of really wonderful happenings. Aunt Edith had not come home, but she came as they were washing their hands and faces for supper, so they were expecting her home a lot earlier in the day than that. That's quite late for her. She had gone up to London. She brought with her presents for Edred's birthday, nicer presents and more of them than he had had for 3 years. The reason they haven't been great presents for the last little while is because they have no money, which is why she has her house full of guests who pay to stay there, boarders. Because it's a seaside town, and people come down to spend time at the seaside, and so they pay to stay there, which means they also pay for getting their food made and the housekeeping done. And the children can be quite nasty, as we found out in the first chapter, which probably some of that might get dealt with in the rest of the story. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, but because of that, she hasn't been able to get them any particularly lavish gifts. She bought him a box of wonderfully varied chocolate and a box of tools, a very beautiful bat and a cricket ball, and a set of stumps. That's for playing cricket. That's all the bits and pieces that you need: a bat, a ball, and stumps, and a beetle-backed paint box in which all the colours were whole pans. The sections in it are full of dry paint as a solid lump that you wet and you rub your brush across to get the colour. But the sections in it were decent sized. Beetle backed meant that the paint box had humped lid at the back of a beetle. I used to have a paint box like that I'm pouring coffee, that my great aunt had given me, because she used to do watercolour painting, and she said this is a good way to get used to it, and she gave me 2 or 3 colours, and that was all, because she said if you learn to actually use your tools well and use your paints well with just the limited range, then you can do really well with what you do art-wise when you have more materials. Otherwise, you end up with a very messy thing going on, and you actually don't learn the details that you need to learn, like how you shade something with watercolours, how much water you use, whether you want it to be a really intense colour or whether you want it to be a very pale colour. Anyway, all that sort of stuff. Great thing to learn, which I never learnt particularly well, but I can't paint. But it was a neat paint box because it was about this big, and it was black enamel, shiny, and it had the lid of it was 3 sections, which each section was bumped. And so when you opened it out, you had all these different compartments where the paint sat. It was actually one for using tube paint. And then in the lid, because it had these curves, you could put the mixed up paint, if you wanted to, when it was really wet and runny, and it would stay in this like a little dish because of the shape of the beetle back. And a beetle-backed paint box in which all the colours were whole pans and not half ones as they usually are in the boxes you get as presents. In this were beautiful paintbrushes, 2 camel's hair ones and a sable with a point as fine as fine. They're expensive brushes. "You are a dear, Auntie," he said, with his arms very tight around her waist. He was very happy, and it made him feel more generous than usual. So he said again, "You are a dear, and Elfrida can use the paint box whenever I'm out, and the camel's hair brushes, not the sable, of course, because that's very special." "Oh, Edred, how jolly of you," said Elfrida, quite touched. "I've got something for Elfrida too," said Aunt Edith, feeling among the rustling pile of brown paper and tissue paper and string and cardboard and shavings that were the husks of Edred's presents, things all packed up to keep them safe for the journey. "Ah, here it is." It was a book, a red book with gold pictures on back and cover, and it was called The Amulet. Just a moment. I will see if I can show you a picture of this very thing. I'm pretty sure I know exactly which one she's talking about. I just have to find the picture and put it in the right place so you can see it. Does this look familiar to anyone? That's gold pressed into the page, into the cover. Very cool. The same amulet from the last book. Exactly the last one of her books that we had. So there's the author giving us a little in-joke of her own. So there you go. How amusing. I've not come across this author cross-referencing other stories before within her own stories. She often does with other things like poems and things like that. Not hers, but other stories and poems that were around at the time. It was a book, a red book with gold pictures on the back and cover, and it was called The Amulet. And so then it was Elfrida's turn to clasp her aunt around the waist and tell her about her dearness. "And now to supper," said the dear. "Roast chicken and gooseberry pie and cream. Oh, this is special food. This is expensive food." To the children, accustomed to the mild uninterestingness of bread and milk for supper, like a piece of bread with maybe some butter on it, maybe just plain bread if it's fresh, and a glass of milk. So that's what they would normally have before they went to bed. This seemed to be the crowning wonder of the day. And what a day it had been. And while they ate the brown chicken with bread sauce and gravy and stuffing, and the gooseberry pie and cream, the aunt told them of her day. It really is a ship, because they've been talking about when your ship comes in, when things change for the better for you. It really is a ship, she said, and the best thing it brings is that we shan't let lodgings anymore. "Hurrah!" was the natural response. "And we shall have more money to spend and be more comfortable. And you can go to a really nice school. And where do you think we're going to live?" "Not," said Elfrida in a whisper, "not at the castle." "Why? How did you guess?" She would have been really puzzled, the aunt. Elfrida looked at Edred. He hastily swallowed a large mouthful of chicken to say, "Auntie, I do hope you won't mind. We went to Arden today. You said we might go this year." Then the whole story came out. Yes, quite all, up to the saying of the spell. "And did anything happen?" Aunt Edith asked. The children were thankful to see that she was only interested and did not seem vexed at what they had done. Well, said Elfrida slowly, we saw a mole. Aunt Elizabeth laughed, and Edred said quickly, that's all the story, Auntie, and I am Lord of Arden, aren't I? Yes, the aunt answered gravely. You are Lord Arden. Oh, ripping, cried Edred, with so joyous a face that his aunt put away a little sermon she had got ready in the train, a little sermon she'd thought through, on the duties of the English aristocracy. That would keep, she thought, and turned to say no, dear, to Elfrida's eager question, then I'm Lady Arden, aren't I? If he's a lord, I ought to be a lady, Elfrida said. It's not fair. Never mind, old girl, said Edred kindly. I'll call you Lady Arden whenever you like. How would you like, said the aunt, to go over and live at the castle now? Tonight? No, she laughed. Next week. You see, I must try to let this house, because she owns it, and I shall be very busy. Mrs. Honeysett, the old lady who used to keep house for your great-uncle, wrote to the lawyers and asked if we could employ her. I remember her when I was a little girl. She is a dear and knows heaps of old songs. How would you like to be there with her while I finish up here and get rid of the lodgers? Oh, there's that bell again. I don't think we'll have any bells at the castle, shall we? They're looking forward to not having lodgers, not having to go to every bell ringing. Oh, that will be great. That will be so much better than what they're currently having to deal with. So that was how it was arranged. The aunt stayed at the bow-windowed house to arrange the new furniture. For the house was to be let furnished, and to pack up the beautiful old things that were real Arden things, and the children went in the carrier's cart with their clothes and their toys in 2 black boxes, and in their hearts a world of joyous anticipations. Mrs. Honeysett received them with a pretty old-fashioned curtsy, which melted into an embrace. You're welcome to your home, my lord, she said with an arm round each child, and you too, miss, my dear. Anyone can see your Ardens, both of you. There was always a boy and a girl, a boy and a girl. She had a sweet, patient face with large, pale blue eyes that twinkled when she smiled, and she almost always smiled when she looked at the children. Oh, but it was fine to unpack one's own box, to lay out one's clothes in long cedar-wood drawers fronted with curved, polished mahogany, to draw back the neat muslin blinds from lattice-paned windows that had always been Arden windows, to look out, as so many Ardens must have done, over land that as far as one could see had belonged to one's family in old days. That it no longer belonged hardly mattered at all to the romance of hearts only 10 and 12 years old. It also means that there's a whole lot of stuff they don't have to look after and take care of. Did you notice how the current book has a similar style of cover to the previous one from the other series, The Amulet? Then romance of hearts only 10 and 12 years old. So Edred is 10 and Elfrida is 12. There you go. Then to go down one's own shallow, polished stairs, that means they're not too steep, where portraits of old Ardens hung on the wall, and to find the cloth laid for dinner in one's own wainscoted parlour. Wainscoting is where they have timber lining the walls up to a certain height, and then a little piece of timber to edge it along the back. So the timber comes up from the floor to a certain height, and then it stops there with a little timber bar along the top, and then above that is painted, or in a more modern house, but not modern, that is painted or wallpapered, plaster, if it's before the days of paint the way we know it, that sort of thing. So wainscoting is that timber lining. So that's what the wainscoting is. Wainscoted parlour, that means it's lined with timber. Now, wainscoting can actually carry on all the way up. but it's the fact that it's these timber panels. To find the cloth laid for dinner in one's own wainscoted parlour, laid for two. I think it was nice of Edred to say the moment Mrs. Honeysett had helped them to toad in the hole and left them to eat it. May I pass you some potatoes, Lady Arden? Elfrida giggled happily. Toad in the hole. Now there's another one. Have you ever had toad in the hole? If you are of an English background, it might be something that you are familiar with the name. If you are not from an English background, you may not be familiar with the name. Toad in the hole. Have you had Yorkshire pudding? Do you know what Yorkshire pudding is? Yorkshire pudding is kind of a it's kind of a bit like a pastry, but it's more like it's a crispy thing that's made out of a batter. But it's not deep fried, it's baked in the oven, so it doesn't have that sort of texture that oil fried batter or fat fried batter does. And it's baked in the oven. So toad in the hole is taking a similar batter, but it doesn't get as puffy on the inside and it doesn't have as dry a finish. And because Yorkshire pudding you usually have with roast, and you pour gravy into because the puddings will often have kind of a cup shape and it'll hold on to the gravy, and it's really nice because it's crisp but it's also soft from the gravy. Anyway, so toad in the hole is where you take cooked sausages, you cook them for the purpose, and then you put them into a baking dish, and then you pour over this batter, and the batter goes all around and covers them if your sausages don't float too much, and then you bake it in the oven, and the batter mix sets, so it's kind of a little bit like a savory, it's not fluffy like a cake, but it's yummy anyway, and then it's got this golden top coating and you've got these sausages in it. That is what they call toad in the hole, and I often make it in winter. Actually, I'm due to make it again. It's very, very yum. Toad, Toad, in the hole, Hole. Probably because it looks like you've got ground and then a sausage poked into it. The sausage being the toad. I'm not quite sure. It tastes yummy, especially if you put a bit of tomato sauce with it, because it's a very mild flavour, but it's a savoury batter that you make up and you let it sit for a little bit, and then you put it into a very hot oven with the sausages, and you want the sausages to have just been cooked so they're quite hot, just because it helps the batter to cook around them because of the depth of the batter. Anyway, toad in the hole, yummy. I told you we get distracted. Somebody can even go and find a recipe for it if they want. Look for an English recipe, not an American recipe, so because the English ones tend to be a lot simpler, because this is what we have in this part of the country that I live in. I'm sharing my grandmother's recipe rather than this is a fancy thing that I did for all my guests the other day, and it's got this great big long story behind it. In terms of when you're looking for these sort of recipes, if it's an English recipe, look for an English source, place to get it from, not sauce that you pour on it, although you can look for a sauce recipe too. Right, so Elfrida giggled happily because he called her Lady Arden. And I'm going to show you the next picture in the actual story. There you go. It's just they didn't give it to me at the right time. And it says here, the children went in the carrier's cart. So this is the carrier. This is the gentleman who, these days we use couriers, we use trucks to freight things places. In the old days you would have a carrier. So he has a horse, he has a cart, that's why it's got 4 wheels, and there's boxes in behind the children here. Normally you stack them as evenly as you can so they don't all fall over. This cart has a cover over it, probably so you don't get too much rain on it if it rains when you're going somewhere, and it will be a fixed cover, not one that he takes down unless he's going to take a lot of time for it and use it for a part of the year where it doesn't rain very often, just because you don't want people's goods getting damaged. But that was how people used to receive deliveries of things. Even if they had been sent from the city on a train, that would have to go from the train station to your house, and so you would actually have a carrier would take your things there. So he's doing the same with furniture, their children's clothes, all that sort of stuff, all in their trunks, chests. The parlour was furnished with the kind of furniture. Oh, I'm having a hard time with some of these words, aren't I? I don't know why. Sorry. The other recipe to look for is Yorkshire pudding. It's not sweet, it's not that sort of pudding, and that's the one that you bake in the oven and you have with a roast dinner. Anyway, the parlour was furnished with the kind of furniture that they knew and loved. It had a long, low window that showed the long, narrow garden outside. The walls were panelled with wood, brownish grey under its polish. "Oh," said Elfrida, "there must be secret panels here." And though Edred said secret fiddlesticks, in his heart he felt she was right. Because a plastered wall or a stone wall is hard to actually put a secret passageway in, but a wooden wall or a wooden finish on a wall, you can hide things behind the wood if you know how to build it that way. After dinner, "May we explore?" Elfrida asked, and Mrs. Honeysett, now a most charming of women, answered heartily, "Why not? It's all his own, bless his dear heart." So they explored. The house was much bigger than they had found it on that wonderful first day when they had acted the part of burglars, probably because they hadn't looked at very much of the house at the time. There was a door covered with faded green baize. They're familiar with a green baize door to separate the servants' quarters from the house. Mrs. Honeysett pointed it out to them with, "Don't you think this is all? There's the other house beyond." So as in, don't think that the part of the house you're in is all there is to the house. Beyond the green baize door, there's the rest of the house. And at the other side of that door, there was indeed the other house. The house that they had already seen was neat, orderly, beeswaxed, as Mrs. Honeysett said, as in it's been polished with beeswax. But she said whacked, not wax. Waxed. That's probably what she's trying to say. As Mrs. Honeysett said, till every bit of furniture shone like a mirror or a fond hope. But beyond the baize door there were shadows, there was dust, windows draped in cobwebs, before which hung curtains tattered and faded, drooping from their poles like old banners that, slowly rotting in great cathedrals, sway in the quiet air where no wind is, stirred perhaps by the breath of Fame's invisible trumpet, to the air of old splendours and glories. Quite poetic. So this part of the house hasn't been cleaned and tidied and been in use for a long time. The carpets lay in rags on the floors. On the furniture the dust lay thick, and on the boards of the corridor and staircase, on the four-post beds in the bedchambers, the hangings hung dusty and rusty. That's a description for when fabric starts to go a bit funny because it's so old. Not metal, rust. The quilts showed the holes eaten by moths and mice. In one room a cradle of carved oak still had a coverlet of tattered silk dragging from it. From the great kitchen hearth, where no fire had been this very long time, yet where still the ashes of the last fire lay grey and white, a chill air came. The place smelt damp and felt... "Do you think it's haunted?" Elfrida asked. "Rot," was her brother's reply, briefly, and they went on. They found long, narrow corridors, hung crookedly with old black framed prints, which drooped cobwebs like grey draped crepe. Crepe is a fabric that's a little bit like crepe paper. That's where it gets its name from. The texture, which is a little bit like a very, very fine up and down pattern to it, and it's soft and it's sort of loose type of texture. And grey crepe is used to be used for fabric for mourning clothes or mourning streamers, which is ribbons that hung off the back of hats, things like that. Because of the way it drapes, I think they used to use it. So like grey draped crepe. So the cobwebs hanging like mourning things when someone's dead, that sort of mourning. They found rooms with floors of grey, uneven oak, and fireplaces in whose grates lay old soot and the broken nests of starlings hatched a very, very long ago, so they've fallen down, which is why the soot's come. Edred's handkerchief, always a rag of all work, rubbed a space in one of the windows, and they looked out over the swelling downs. These are these long hills that the castle is on. And they looked out over the swelling downs. This part of the house was not built within the castle. That was plain. So part of the house is inside the castle itself. The castle sort of holds on to it. Then part of it's outside that space. When they had opened every door and looked at every room of decayed splendour, they went out and round. Then they saw that this was a wing built right out of the castle, a wing with squarish windows with carved dripstones. All the windows were yellow as parchment, with the inner veil laid on them by time and the spider. The ivy grew thick round the windows, almost hiding some of them altogether. "Oh," cried Elfrida, throwing herself down on the turf, "it's too good to be true. I can't believe it." "What I can't believe," said Edred, doing likewise, "is that precious mole." "But we saw it," said Elfrida. "You can't help believing things when you've seen them." "I can," said Edred, superior. "You remember the scarlet toadstools in Hereward?" It's a play or a book that they've had to do for school. "Suppose the peppermint creams were enchanted to make us dream things." "They were good," said Elfrida. "I say, well, have you made up any poetry to call the mole with?" "Have you?" "No, I've tried though." "I've tried, and I've done it." "Oh, Edred, you are clever. Do say it." "If I do you think the mole will come?" "Of course it will," she said. "Well," said Edred slowly, "of course I want to find the treasure and all that, but I don't believe in it. It isn't likely, that's what I think. Now, is it likely?" "Unlikelier things happened in the amulet," said Elfrida. "Ah," said Edred, "that's a story." "The mole said we were in a story." "I say, Edred, do say your poetry." Edred slowly said it. "Mole, mole, come out of your hole. I know you're blind, but I don't mind." Elfrida looked eagerly round her. There was the short turf, that's the grass. The castle walls, ivied and grey, rose high above her. Pigeons circled overhead, and in the arches of the windows and on the roof of the house they perched, preening their bright feathers or telling each other cuckoo, 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 whatever that may mean. But there was no mole, not a hint or a dream or an idea of a mole. "Edred," said her sister. "Well?" "Did you really make that up? Don't be cross, but I do think I've heard something like it before." I adopted it," said Edred. Said Elfrida. "Haven't you seen it in books, adopted from the French?" "I altered it." "I don't believe that'll do," she said. "How much did you alter? What's the real poetry like? The mole, he lives in a hole, the mole is blind, I don't mind," said Edred sulkily. "Auntie told it to me the day you went to her with Mrs. Harrison." "I'm sure you ought to make it up all yourself. You see, the mole doesn't come." "There isn't any mole," said Edred. "Let's both think hard. I'm sure I could make poetry if I knew how to begin." "If anyone's got to make it, it's me," said Edred. "You're not Lord Arden." "You're very unkind," said Elfrida, and Edred knew she was right. "I don't mind trying," he said condescendingly. "You make the poetry and I'll say it." Elfrida buried her head in her hands and thought, till her forehead felt as large as a mangel wurzel, and her blood throbbed in her head, in her forehead, like a church clock ticking. There's your next word to write down and to look up. Mangel wurzel. Mangel. Next part of the word is it's hyphenated, wurzel. Wurzel. Mangel wurzel. And I'm writing it down myself. "Got it yet?" he asked, just as she thought she really had got it. "Don't," said the poet in agony. Then there was silence, except for the pigeons and the skylarks and the mooing of a cow at a distant red-roofed farm. "Will this do?" she said at last, lifting her head from her hands and her elbows from the grass. There were deep dents and lines on her elbows made by the grass stalks she had leaned on so long. "Spit it out," said Edred. Thus encouraged, Elfrida said very slowly and carefully, "Oh, Mouldiwarp," I think it would rather be called that than mole, don't you? "Oh, Mouldiwarp, do please come out and show us how to set about it." "That means the treasure. I hope it'll understand." "That's not poetry," said Edred. "Yes, it is, if you say it right on. Oh, Mouldiwarp, do please come out and show us how to set about it." "There ought to be some more," said Edred, rather impressed all the same. "There is," said Elfrida. "Oh, wait a minute, I shall remember it directly. What I mean is how to find the treasure. What I mean is how to find the treasure and make Edred brave and wise and kind." "I'm kind enough if it comes to that," said Lord Arden. "Oh, I know you are, but poetry has to rhyme. You know it has. I expect poets often have to say what they don't mean because of that." "Well, say it straight through," said Edred, because he's trying to get the rhythm of it, the feel of it, to make it into a poem, by the way he says it. And Elfrida said obediently, "Oh, Mouldiwarp, do please come out and show us how to set about it. What I mean is how to find the treasure and make Edred brave and wise and kind." "I'll write it down if you've got a pencil." Edred produced a piece of pink chalk, but he had no paper, so Elfrida had to stretch out her white petticoat, put a big stone on the hem, and hold it out tightly with both hands while Edred wrote at her dictation. Then Edred studiously repeated the lines again and again, as he was accustomed to repeat the Battle of Ivry, Ivry. That's, I think, another poem that they've had to learn at school, till at last he was able to stand up and say, "Oh, Mouldiwarp, do please come out and show me how to set about it. What I mean is how to find the treasure and make me brave and wise and, if you don't mind," he added. And instantly there was the white mole. "What do you want now?" it said very crossly. This sounds a little bit like the Samian. He was a bit grumpy when they found him too. "What do you want now?" it said very crossly. "And call that poetry?" "It's the first I ever made," said Elfrida of the hot ears. "Perhaps it'll be better next time." "We want you to do what the spell says," said Edred. "Make you brave and wise? That can't be done all in a minute. That's a long job, that is," said the mole viciously. "Don't be so cross, dear," said Elfrida. "And if it's going to be so long, hadn't you better begin?" "I ain't a-going to do no more in my share," said the mole, somewhat softened, though perhaps by the deer. "You tell me what you want, and perhaps I'll do it." "I know what I want," said Edred, "but I don't know whether you can do it." "Ha!" laughed the mole contemptuously. "I got it out of a book Elfrida got on my birthday," Edred said. "The children in it went into the past." The amulet book. "And find that treasure. Choose your period," said the mole wearily. "Choose your period. What time you'd like to go back to. If you don't choose before I've counted 10, it's all off. 1, 2, 3, 4. It counted 10 through a blank silence. 9, 10, it ended. "Oh, very well then. You'll have to take your luck. That's all." So he's going to send them back in time. "Bother," said Edred. "I couldn't think of anything except all the dates of all the kings of England all at once." "Lucky to know him," said the mole, and so plainly not believing that he did know them that Edred found himself saying under his breath, "William the First, 1066, William the Second, 1087, Henry the First, 1100. The mole yawned, which of course was very rude of it. "Don't be cross, dear," Elfrida said again. "You help us in your own way." "Now you're talking," said the mole, which of course Elfrida knew. "Well, I'll give you a piece of advice. Don't you be nasty to each other for a whole day, and then—" "You needn't talk," said Edred, still under his breath. "Very well," said the mole, whose ears were sharper than his eyes. "I won't." "Oh, don't," sighed Elfrida. "What is it we are to do when we've been nice to each other for a whole day?" "Well, when you've done that," said the mole, "look for the door." "What door?" asked Elfrida. "The door," said the mole. "But where is it?" "In the house it be, of course," said the mole. "Where else to gracious should it be?" And it ran with mouse-like quickness across... Sorry, I'm just getting my slippers again because now I'm cooling down. And it ran with mouse-like quickness across the grass and vanished down what looked like a rabbit hole. "Now," said Elfrida triumphantly, "you've got to believe in this mole." "Yes," said Edred, "and you've got to be nice to me for a whole day or it's no use my believing." Aren't I generally nice?" the girl pleaded, and her lips trembled. "Yes," said her brother. "Yes, Lady Arden, and now I'm going to be nice too. And where shall we look for the door?" This problem occupied them till tea time. After tea they decided to paint, with the new paint box and the beautiful new brushes. Elfrida wanted to paint Mr. Miller's illustrations in The Amulet. Mr. Miller is the chap who illustrated The Amulet, and the pictures we've got for this book were also done by Mr. Miller, so she's thinking about painting the illustrations in the book that they received. And Edred wanted to paint them too. This could not be, as you will see, if you have the book. I'm not quite sure what she means. Edred contended that they were his paints. Elfrida reminded him that it was her book. The heated discussion that followed ended quite suddenly and breathlessly. "I won't be a selfish pig," said Edred. "No more would I," said Elfrida. "Oh, Edred, is this being nice to each other for 24 hours? "Oh," said Edred. "Yes, well, all right. Never mind. We'll begin again tomorrow. I've just had a thought. It may be that because there's no illustrations opposite each other, it would be quite hard for two people to be painting to colour the illustrations in the book at the same time." That might be what she was referring to when it said, "If you've got the book, you'll know." "Oh, yes, well, all right. Never mind. We'll begin again tomorrow," to be nice to each other. But it was much more difficult than you would think to be really nice to your brother or sister for a whole day. 3 days passed before the two Ardens could succeed in this seemingly so simple thing. The days were not dull ones at all. There were beautiful things in them that I wish I had time to tell you about, such as climbings and discoveries and books with pictures and a bureau with a secret drawer. It had nothing in it but a farthing and a bit of red tape. Secret drawers never have, but it was a very nice secret drawer for all of that. And at last a day came when each held its temper with a strong bit, like the bit you use for a horse, to help steer it where you want it to go. They began by being very polite to each other, and presently it grew to seem like a game. "Let's call each other Lord and Lady Arden all the time and pretend that we're no relation," said Elfrida, and really that helped tremendously. It is wonderful how much more polite you can be to outsiders than you can to your relations. Have you noticed that? Who are, when all's said and done, the people you really love. Should be easier, but it's not. As the time went on, they grew more and more careful. It was like building a house of cards. As hour after hour of blameless politeness was added to the score, they grew almost breathlessly anxious. If, after all this, some natural annoyance would spoil everything... "I do hope," said Edred towards tea time, "that you won't go and do anything tiresome." "Oh dear, I do hope I shan't," said Elfrida. And this was just like them both. After tea they decided to read so as to lessen the chances of failure. They both wanted the same book, Treasure Island. And for a moment the niceness of both hung in the balance. Then, with one accord, each said, "No, you have it," and the matter ended in each taking a quite different book that it didn't particularly want to read. At bedtime, Edred lighted Elfrida's candle for her, and she picked up the matches for him when he dropped them. "Bless their hearts," said Mrs. Honeysett in the passage. They parted with the heartfelt remark, "We've done it this time." Now, of course, in the 3 days when they had not succeeded in being nice to each other, they had looked for the door. But as the mole had not said where it was, nor what kind of a door, their search had not been fruitful. Most of the rooms had several doors, and as there were a good many rooms, the doors numbered 57, counting cupboards. And among these there were none that seemed worthy to rank above all the others as the door. Many of the doors in the old part of the house looked as though they might be the one, but since there were many, no one could be sure. "How shall we know?" said Edred the next morning through his egg and toast. "I suppose it's like when people fall in love," said Elfrida through hers. "You see the door, and you know at once that it's the only princess in the world for you. I mean, door, of course," she added. And then, when breakfast was over, they stood up and looked at each other. "Now," they said together, "we'll look at every single door. Perhaps there'll be magic writing on the door come out in the night, like mushrooms," said the girl. "More likely that mole was kidding us," said the boy. "Oh, no," said the girl, "and we must look at them on both sides, every one. Oh, I do wonder what's inside the door. Don't you? Bluebeard's wives, I shouldn't wonder," said the boy, "with their heads." "If you don't stop," said the girl, putting her fingers in her ears, "I won't look for the door at all. No, I don't mean to be aggravating, but please don't. You know I hate it," when he's talking about bloodthirsty things. Yeah, I can understand that. "Come on," said Edred, "and don't be a duffer, old chap." The proudest moments of Elfrida's life were when her brother called her old chap. So they went and looked at all the 57 doors, one after the other, on the inside and on the outside. Some were painted and some were grained, that's plain wood. Some were carved and some were plain. Some had panels and others had none, but they were all of them doors, just doors and nothing more. Each was just a door, and none of them had any claim at all to be spoken of as the door. And when they had looked at all the 57 on the inside and on the outside, there was nothing for it but to look again. Yeah, that kind of makes sense, because there's not a lot else that you can do. Aunt, if you want to do the puzzle, the link is just jigsaw, ! Jigsaw, and it'll bring it up for you, or puzzle, or PZ, or any of those other ones that Goriki put up last time. Anyway, I'm going to carry on, just if you were wanting to do it. So they looked again very carefully to see if there were any... No, hang on, I feel like I missed a little bit. So they looked... And when they had looked at all the 57 on the inside and on the outside, there was nothing for it but to look again. So they looked again very carefully to see if there was any magic writing that they hadn't happened to notice, and there wasn't. So then they began to tap the walls to try and discover a door with a secret spring, and that was no good either. "There isn't any old door," said Edred. "I told you that mole was pulling our leg." That means teasing. "I'm sure there is," said Elfrida, sniffing a little from prolonged anxiety. "Look here, let's play it like the willing game. I'll be blindfolded, and you hold my hand and will me to find the door." "I don't believe in the willing game," said Edred disagreeably. Dear. He likes just not believing in lots of things, doesn't he? "No more do I," said Elfrida, "but we must do something, you know. It's no good sitting down and saying there isn't any door." "There isn't all the same," said Edred. "Well, come on." So Elfrida was blindfolded with her best silk scarf, the blue one with the hem-stitched ends, and Edred took her hands, and at once... This happened in the library where they had found the spell. Elfrida began to walk in a steady and purposeful way. She crossed the hall and went through the green baize door into the other house, went along its corridor and up its dusty stairs, up and up and up. "We've looked everywhere here," said Edred. But Elfrida did not stop for that. "I know I'm going straight to it," she said. "Oh, do try to believe a little, or we shall never find anything," and went on along the corridor where the spiders had draped the picture frames with their grey crepe curtains. There were many doors in this corridor, and Elfrida stopped suddenly at one of them, a door just like the others. "This," she said, putting her hand out till it rested on the panel, all spread out like a pink starfish. "This is the door." She felt for the handle, turned it, and went in, still pulling at Edred's hand and with the blue scarf still on her eyes. Edred followed. "I say," he said, and then she pulled off the scarf. The door closed itself very softly behind them. They were in a long attic room close under the roof, a room that they had certainly, in all their explorings, never found before. There were no windows. The roof sloped down at the sides almost to the floor. There was no ceiling. Old worm-eaten roof beams showed the tiles between, and old tie beams crossed it so as you stared up it looked like a great ladder with the rungs very far apart. Here and there through the chinks of the tiles a golden dusty light filtered in, and outside was the tick-tick of moving pigeon feet, the rustling of pigeon feathers, the coo-roo-coo of pigeon voices. The long room was almost bare. Only along each side, close under the roof, was a row of chests, and no two chests were alike. "Oh," said Edred, "I'm kind and wise now. I feel it inside me. So now we've got the treasure, we'll rebuild the castle." He got to the nearest chest and pushed up the lid. But Elfrida had to push too before he could get the heavy thing up, and when it was up, alas, there was no treasure in the chest, only folded clothes. So then they tried the next chest, and in all the chests there was no treasure at all, only clothes. Clothes and more clothes. "Well, never mind," said Elfrida, trying to speak comfortably. "They'll be splendid for dressing up in." "That's all very well," said Edred, "but I want the treasure." "Perhaps," said Elfrida with some want of tact, "perhaps you're not good and wise yet." "Not quite, I mean," she hastened to add. "Let's take the things out and look at them. Perhaps the treasure's in the pockets." But it wasn't, not a bit of it, not even a threepenny bit. The clothes in the first chest were full riding cloaks and long boots, short-waisted dresses and embroidered scarves, tight breeches and coats with bright buttons. There were very interesting waistcoats and odd-shaped hats. One, a little green one, looked as though it would fit Edred. He tried it on, and at the same minute Elfrida lifted out a little straw bonnet trimmed with blue ribbons. "Here's one for me," she said, and put it on. And then it seemed as though the cooing and rustling of pigeons came right through the roof and crowded round them in a sort of dazzlement and cloud of pigeon noises. The pigeon noises came closer and closer, and garments were drawn out of the chest and put on the children. They did not know how it was done any more than you do, but it seemed somehow that the pigeon noises were like hands that helped, and presently there the two children stood in clothing such as they had never worn. Elfrida had a short-waisted dress of green sprigged cotton, itchy ear, with a long and skimpy skirt. Her square-toed brown shoes had gone, and her feet wore flimsy sandals. Her arms were bare, and a muslin handkerchief was folded across her chest. Edred wore very white trousers that came right up under his arms, a blue coat with brass buttons, and a sort of frilly tucker round his neck. There's an old phrase that I remember being told about when you had to get dressed up to get ready for some occasion. You were told to go and put on your best bib and tucker. The bib is the shirt front, because it was an extra piece that was added on to keep it neat and tidy and clean. And tucker was the frilly ruff, which later became a tie, that was fastened around your neck as an ornament. So that's the frilly tucker they're talking about, I think. So you can look that one up too if you want. "I say," they both said, when the pigeon noises had taken themselves away, and they were face to face in the long, empty room. "That was funny," Edred added. "Let's go down and show Mrs. Honeysett." But when they got out of the door, they saw that Mrs. Honeysett, or someone else, must have been very busy while they were on the other side of it, for the floor of the gallery was neatly swept and polished. A strip of carpet, worn but clean, ran along it, and prints hung straight and square on the cleanly whitewashed walls, and there was not a cobweb to be seen anywhere. The children opened the gallery doors as they went along, and every room was neat and clean. No dust, no tattered curtains, only perfect neatness and a sort of rather bare comfort showed in all the rooms. Mrs. Honeysett was in none of them. There were no workmen about, yet the baize door was gone, and in its stead was a door of old wood, very shaky and crooked. The children ran down the passage to the parlour and burst open the door, looking for Mrs. Honeysett. There was a very upright old lady with a very upright old gentleman, and their clothes were not the clothes people wear nowadays. They were like the clothes the children themselves had on. The old lady was hemming a fine white frill. Sitting sewing, hemming a fine white frill. The old gentleman was reading what looked like a page from some newspaper. "Hoity-toity," said the old lady very severely. We forget our manners, I think. Make your curtsy, miss." Elfrida made one as best she could. "To teach you respect for your elders," said the old gentleman, "you had best get your by heart." Sorry, I'll read that again. "To teach your respect for your I'll try again. "To teach you respect for your elders," said the old gentleman, "you had best get by heart one of Dr. Watts' divine and moral songs. I leave you to see to it, my lady." Here's the picture. Here's the current picture. This one here. The children have just come through the door where the green baize door used to be. They have come through, and then there's this lady and this gentleman. Remember it talked about the pants being reasonably well-fitting, I think? There's the tucker, the frill around his neck, the high-waisted pants, and she's got bare arms under her dress, and she's wearing some little sandals. I'll keep reading. He laid down the sheet of the newspaper he was reading and went out, very straight and dignified, as you can see from the way he's looking here, with his holding his hand up with his pince-nez. No, actually it's not. It's a lorgnette, which is the glasses that are on a handle. Holding up his lorgnette and looking at her through them. And without quite knowing how it happened, the children found themselves sitting on two little stools in a room that was, and was not, the parlour. In which they had had that hopeful eggy breakfast, each now holding a marbled side of Dr. Watts's hymns. So what she means there, marbled side of. So it's a book. Dr. Watts's hymns is a book, and the pages around the edge, and probably also the outer cover, maybe the inner cover, I'm not sure, depending on how it's bound, are marbled, which is like a particular colour swirly finish that old books would sometimes have. So they're each holding half of the book, and they're having to learn this poem or sermon or something to learn better manners when they come into the room, because she forgot to curtsy. "You will commit to memory the whole of one commencing, 'Happy the child whose youngest years receive instruction well.' And you will be deprived of pudding with your dinners," remarked the old lady. "I say," murmured Edred. "Oh, hush," said Elfrida, as the old lady carried her cambric frills to the window seat. Cambric is a type of fabric, by the way. "But I won't stand it," whispered Edred. "I'll tell Aunt Edith. And who's she, anyhow?" He glowered at the old lady across the speckless carpet. "Oh, don't you understand?" Elfrida whispered back. "We've got turned into somebody else, and she's our grandmamma." I don't know how it was that Elfrida saw this and Edred didn't. Perhaps because she was a girl, perhaps because she was 2 years older than he. They looked hopelessly at the bright sunlight outside, and then at the dull, small print of the marble-backed book. "Edred," said the old lady, "hand me the paper." She pointed at the sheet on the brightly polished table. He got up and carried it across to her, and as he did so he glanced at it and saw the Times, June 16, 1807. 100 years previous to the book that they are in in real life and that we're reading from. And then he knew, as well as Elfrida did, exactly where he was and when. And that's the end of that chapter. And we'll have some more of that next time. Man, they're long chapters in this book. Oh my goodness, the next one's not quite so long, but we'll save that one for next time. So thank you for being here. It's lovely having you here. I hope you've enjoyed the new, I'm trying to think, my words are going funny, the new layout that I've got set up. Did you notice the little wee sound bar across the bottom that is responding to the sound of me talking and anything else through the microphone? See? It goes away when I stop with the sounds. Right, so we'll see you next time. I read 3 days a week. I forgot to tell you that at the beginning if you're new here. I read 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 3 p.m. New Zealand time. And if you look on my Twitch schedule page, then it will show you what time that is and what day it is, because I live near the dateline, what day it is for the time zone that you're in. And we'll see you next time, and I look forward to it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the community, and thank you for enjoying my reading. I really like reading for you. It's lots of fun, especially when we have a fun book like this. And all of that sort of stuff. Make sure you look after yourselves, get enough rest, get enough water to drink, and all of those other things that you really must do to look after yourselves, to stop yourself getting sick if you haven't got sick yet. And if you are ill, then look after yourself so you get better. As much sleep as you can get, lots of water, lots of healthy things to eat and drink that you can cope with, and don't push yourself too hard. Anyway, lovely seeing you. Great to have you here, and see you next time. In the meantime, happy reading and goodbye.